I'd like to begin the presentation today with a bit of a background to the United States Bishop's pastoral. This is, first of all, I'm a Canadian bishop, so I had no hand in this, so I'm speaking about this from the outside. The bishops set up a task force about 15 years ago in the United States to address the forthcoming pressure that they felt was going to be found in the United States Catholic Church in terms of human resources, personnel, and in terms of institutions, in terms of pastoral planning, and in terms of the financial resources that would be needed to carry out the mission of Christ in our world. Many of the bishops, I think, who had entrusted this challenge to a committee expected that they would come up with some very innovative fundraising proposals. But instead, they came up with the bishop's pastoral letter on stewardship, which was, I think, a very prophetic document. I would even say it's an inspired document. If by inspired you understand the coming of the Holy Spirit to address the church in a new age and for new circumstances. Sometimes when we meet at a place like this and we see all the materials that are available outside in the booths, technological innovations, computer programs, databases, collection envelopes, all that type of thing, we can say, you know, what has all this got to do with stewardship? I don't think it's a necessary dichotomy that we need to establish between fundraising and stewardship. I think fundraising techniques are simply a way to allow an aspect of stewardship to come to the fore. I think the most important thing, though, is that if we're going to truly appreciate this document, we really need to root it in its theology and its vision. What do we have in the document? Well, you have 6 things listed there on the screen, but before I get to that, I'd just like to say that, and this is the most important part of looking through the document, is to see that the document begins with 3 convictions, speaks about 3 realities that they are convinced of, and then elaborates 5 principles. And I'm just going to mention those before I get to the overview of the document. These are presented, by the way, in a kind of poetic layout in the very beginning of the document, the convictions. The convictions begin with the whole notion of discipleship. That disciples are called and make a decision to follow Jesus. So decision is important. The result of this decision is a conversion. And the struggle with conversion, of course, is that we think that conversion is simply a momentary, one-time thing. But what the document suggests to us throughout is that conversion is ongoing, lifelong, and touches every aspect of a person's life. And the third conviction is that stewardship, the notion of stewardship, recognizes that all that we have, all that we are, is God's gift. So, decision to follow Jesus, conversion, the entire part of one's life, and recognition that all is God's gift. The bishops then move to speak of 3 realities. The first is that life as a Christian today is difficult. Difficult for a number of external reasons, perhaps those that did not exist in earlier generations on the North American continent, when the immigrant community came and appropriated life here and developed and grew and established institutions. But the success of the American and the Canadian experience of immigrants, Catholics coming to the land, becoming established, has put them in the danger of a risk. And the risk is that their religious experience is no longer a communal one, but it's a privatized one. That religion belongs on the margins of society, in one's home, but not in the public square. There are a lot of other things that they say about the challenge to from our society, but I think that will suffice for now. This leads then to a second reality, a choice, a little bit like the principle of decision. Because of the split between faith and life, because of rugged individualism, evangelization is no longer a priority, or doesn't appear to be a priority in the church. The church, in this vision, is preoccupied simply with maintenance. So there is a split then, even among Catholics, in terms of what we are called to do, what we are called to be, and how we are to perceive our resources and how to use them. It's in this context that stewardship introduces the principle of the 3 T's, the time, the talent, and the treasure. Above all, time, talent, and treasure says that stewardship is not an option for Catholics who understand what being a disciple entails. This is pretty profoundly radical. Stewardship is not an option. It's really the call to be a Christian today. And so the vision then that follows from the challenge and the choice is an invitation that the bishops give to all, including the bishops themselves, to have an ongoing conversion, an ongoing call. You might think of Mother Teresa as an example of such a call. Mother Teresa was living a very active and dynamic life as a teacher. She was a religious who had left her homeland to go to India. But one day she saw Christ calling her to leave the religious commitment that she had to embrace a new one. And I would say the bishops believe that this letter is an invitation for us to strike out on a different path. The organizing of the letter then goes, or the document goes on 5 principles. So 3 convictions, 3 realities, and 5 principles. The first principle is called the call, that every person has a personal vocation, married life, single life, consecrated life, priesthood. Everyone has a call. The second principle is that we are to follow the way of Jesus. We are called to evangelize as he did. This is the mission of the Second Vatican Council, that we live out of Lumen Gentium and Gaudium et Spes. Lumen Gentium says that the church is the light of the world, and we as Christians are called to illuminate and to share our message with others. Then it speaks about living as a steward. And it says, I think, 2 very profound things. We are called to work with God in the task of creation and in the task of redemption. So we are co-creators and co-redeemers. If we are stewards then, and we are living as stewards, we are of a stewardship role within the church itself. We have co-responsibility then for the church. And so the issues that have surfaced in the United States, for example, in the last little while, in terms of who's responsible for the church, in terms of issues of priestly personnel and issues of abuse, of use of funds, all of this calls for the whole church to be co-responsible. The implications of this, of course, we still have to work out. And lastly, the document ends with a portrait of the Christian steward drawn from the New Testament and giving primary place to the Blessed Mother, Mary, in her service.